Welcome to the Friends of NPACE Podcast. My name is Josh Plotkin. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for NPACE, and I'm so excited to have Diana Page with us today. And we're going to have a great conversation about the current state of nurse practitioners in the workplace, what she's doing on social media, and the fantastic resources that she has available as a nurse practitioner mentor and burnout coach. And Diana's with us today. Diana, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you're doing, and sort of how we've come to interact with you over these past few months?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm psyched to be here. I've actually been to your conferences many times in the past. I was like reminiscing about going when I worked at my first NP job to a conference in Chicago, which was really lovely. So I really appreciate everything that you do, and I'm really grateful to be here. So thank you. So my name is Diana Page. You might know me on Instagram as Catalyst for Self-Care. I am a neuro NP. I've been a neuro NP for about 14 years now, which is wild to even think about. Time flies. I had my first NP job in the Boston area, so I definitely love what you're doing down there. And now I currently work at a big healthcare system here in Maine, where I treat mostly patients with epilepsy and headache disorders. It's kind of my subspecialty. I also am a nurse burnout coach, nurse practitioner burnout coach, where I empower high-achieving healthcare professionals, which I think most of us are, to reconnect with their identity outside of work, hone in on kind of what's triggering their burnout, enhance their well-being through things like boundary setting, optimal life, career design, and personal growth. And I have a lot of content on Instagram and things on my website.
Amazing. I really am looking forward to our conversation because you have the clinical experience and what you've been through in your career journey, and then how that sort of led you to where you're at now, where you're still doing the clinical, but you've created this whole the other business, if you will, where you're helping other nurse practitioners. So really excited for our conversation. And where I'd love to start is in terms of sort of just what you see as the current state of nurse practitioners in the workplace. And I know that's a loaded question, but what do you see as some of the major challenges providers are experiencing, and just your grasp on the overall state of things at this point in time?
Yeah, so that is a really large question, as I know you know. And I think the way I'm going to approach answering that is really from kind of what I do now, which is I talk to a lot of nurse practitioners, a lot of APPs and providers in general. And I think a lot of clinicians right now are struggling with burnout, with kind of unrealistic expectations when it comes to their workload, having adequate time for administrative tasks like charting and non-billable tasks like, my chart messages or patient messages, all the things that we have to do every day, day in and day out, to really take optimal care of our patients. And I also think that nurse practitioners really struggle with the idea that we are not always given seats at the table where decisions are being made. I think that that's changing, and I think that there's a lot of amazing nurse practitioner APP leaders out there kind of paving the way for us. But I do think that a lot of people struggle with that because decisions get made that affect our our clinical practice that we may or may not get a say on, and it can be very frustrating and can contribute to our lack of fulfillment at work and our level of burnout.
Excellent. Appreciate that. There's a few things I think I want to follow up on there, and it's the last thing you just mentioned. I've been at NPACE for just about 8 years now, and in those 8 years and being involved in the nurse practitioner world, if you will, how things have changed when it comes to nurse practitioners having a seat at the table. We've certainly seen some great advancements state by state, but where do you feel nurse practitioners that may not be getting the exposure or the voice that you would hope that they would have? What sort of things do you think that they can do to advocate for themselves and position themselves at the table better than they might be?
That's a great question. I think, sometimes we think that it's harder than it is. We see problems, we see change, we see places where changes need to be made, but we sometimes get derailed by our own, we are overwhelmed and we are like, I can't take on one extra thing. I hear that all the time where it's like, I see this issue, I want to take this leadership position, but I just don't have the bandwidth for it. I think that comes up a lot. And I also think that we don't ask sometimes because we don't think that we are capable of doing it, or, where do we even start? And a lot of times we make it bigger than it needs to be. And it's like, you can start super, super small. You can just get curious with people. You can ask even just within your department, let alone an entire health system. I know where I work now, I obviously focus a lot on nurse practitioner well-being. So I wanted to position myself within my organization as a change maker and as someone who is asking questions. So I looked for those opportunities. I didn't wait for them to come to me. I emailed people who were doing those things, who were physicians or were people that were, in these groups of providers that didn't include nurse practitioners, and asked to have a seat at the table. Like, we can do that. We can ask to see at the table. We can do those things. So I think sometimes it's like, it just seems overwhelming as to where to start first. But we just have to start. You just have to take that baby step forward and like network with people. That's why places, conferences like the NPACE conference are so great, because you get to network with all these people and kind of hear what other people are doing at different institutions, see who you can connect with that have, done it before. Even like, here in Maine with our well-being practices, we've networked with people at Mayo because they have a ton of initiatives around nurse practitioner and provider well-being. So it's like, you can leverage resources as needed and kind of empower yourself to continue to build that momentum.
No, that's fantastic. I think there's a few great takeaways from that. And it's one, if it's possible to be proactive, try and be proactive and look at the things that you want to have an impact on. And one thing that I always tell our staff at NPACE and in other realms of life, I think, is trying to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Like, it's not easy to do that, but like, the worst thing that somebody might say is, I don't think we're going to go in that direction, or maybe not at this time. I think that knowing that even if the answer might not be the one that you're looking for, that the fact that you were able to have the conversation that you wanted to have is important in and of itself. So I certainly think NPs can take that away. Just if you see something in your career or in your circumstance, feel that empowerment to speak up about that and advocate for it. So that's awesome. I think that sort of not shifts gears, but what I want to follow up on is like nurse practitioners and when they don't feel that they have sort of that 100% in the tank, or they're going into a day where they're like, I just don't have it today. Like, this is my third day of a 12-hour shift and I've been, unable to catch up on life and what's going on there, and have a potentially difficult patient coming in today. Like, what sort of things can folks do to help mentally prepare themselves for those sorts of days and ease the burden, if you will?
That's a great question, because those days are going to come to everyone, no matter how much you plan or how much, self-care you're doing, quote unquote, and how good your sleep habits are. Like, those days are always going to come up where you feel overwhelmed or they're just wild. And then the next day, maybe you feel depleted. I will say in general, if you find that you're kind of running on fumes regularly, a couple of things I find are really helpful is, first, just kind of like acknowledging where you're at. I think, as high achieving healthcare professionals, we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to excel and to do and to check the boxes and to keep showing up. And like, sure, like, we want to do our job well, but we can't set ourselves on fire to keep other people warm. And it's important to like acknowledge that you're in a place you're operating beyond your limits, and that you're feeling depleted, and that you have to recognize as well that when we're in that state of being, we probably aren't going to perform in the way that we want to perform. There's many studies that look at burnout and patient outcomes and things there is a real impact of provider burnout. So it's about acknowledging like where you're even at and checking in with yourself regularly, so when you're feeling depleted, because a lot of us are just going to kind of by default push through and keep going on autopilot. So acknowledging that, and then having realistic expectations for yourself, having the ability to set really healthy boundaries with your time and energy, whether that's with patients or your team or your family or your, that friend that wants to hang out with you and you just can't hang out that day because you're super depleted. It's okay to set boundaries so that you can recharge your battery and be able to show up the way you want to show up for your patients and for yourself. I will also say that giving yourself a lot of self-compassion is important. I think, again, we feel a lot of guilt and shame around taking time for predictable rest. But taking time for predictable rest is just one piece of your kind of burnout management strategy that's going to be essential for you to be able to continue to show up well. And then I will say lastly, I mean, there's so many, I could literally talk about this all day, but
Oh, that's
but
great. That's why we're here.
like talking to people that you know, like seeking support, you know, like having a network of people that you can talk to, that you can be like, oh man, like I just really need to talk, whether it's a therapist or whether it's your best friend from grad school or your partner or your cat or your dog, whatever it is, like have someone that you have as an outlet, whether that's journaling. Many people find that really helpful. It's just having somewhere to kind of offload those emotions. And I actually personally really enjoy doing like a post shift intentional time for reflection where you can, and there's one on my website that you can download for free. I think we can put that in the show notes. Where you can ask yourself, like, what went well? What didn't go well? Like, what challenges did I have today? Like, how can I advocate for myself? Like, what's, you know, what was a win? Because we need to acknowledge those things in order to boost our confidence and assess like where we're at and maybe what boundaries we need to be setting, what we need to ask from leadership, if there's resources that we need, if there's different training that we need. These are all things to bring awareness to intentionally, because it's so easy to just like leave work, go home, make dinner, you know, and then you're up on your phone, you know, and then you don't sleep
The rat
well.
race.
It's kind of like that rat race. So you have to take time to just slow down, take a pause, you know, check yourself before you wreck yourself, as they say, and then decide, you know, what do you need to support yourself in that moment? Like, what do you feel? What do you want to feel? And what's step one to get there?
That's awesome. And like the introspection, if you will, like you have to be able to take a look at your situation and say to yourself, like, this is where I'm at, and these are the steps that I need to take to be able to continue to be comfortable or make some necessary changes if that's the case. The line that you had saying you can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm is in 20 episodes of the podcast one of the best things that I've ever heard. Like
Okay.
if you're in a place where you're in that rat race and constantly trying to keep up with it, then you're not able to do the things that you want to do. But that line is going to stick with me, and I feel like I'll be using that in other places. Great. I think it's also a great segue to talk about some of the resources that you have and what you've done with Self-Care Catalyst, because one of the things you mentioned is having that outlet, whether it's journaling, whether it's being able to talk with friends or partners or professional about your situation. But what you've done is created this community and opportunity for nurse practitioners who are going through shared experiences to be able to come together and work with you and others to help themselves. So tell us a little bit about what that's all about, how folks can get involved, and just all the different resources that you have available.
Yeah, thanks. So I will say, just to start off, like I lived burnout. Like I'm a burnout survivor myself, which is why I do what I do now. I felt incredibly let down by my education in this. Like I felt very well prepared clinically, you know. Obviously it's always that learning curve, especially in the first couple of years, be like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually out in the wild doing this. This is crazy. But like in terms of well-being and knowing what like a toxic work environment looked like and what burnout even what, like no one ever mentioned the word burnout. I mean, they do a little bit now, and I think more people are talking about it. But when I started my platform, people really weren't talking about it. Like some corporate burnout stuff was out there, but really not a whole lot for healthcare related burnout and nurse practitioner burnout, especially. Like it was crickets. And for me, having lived it myself and having seen many, many, many of my friends from grad school and my colleagues just completely tapped out, I was like, we need to be talking about this. Like, and I knew, having healed from my own burnout, that I had resources and I had kind of strategies that work well. And now, of course, hundreds and hundreds of people have used them, and they work really well. And there's tons of evidence-based work now through places like Mayo and these other places that, you know, look at strategies like this that can help clinicians feel better. But I created my platform mostly to just put out content to help people, and was right before the pandemic hit. And then of course, everything hit the fan in the early part of 2020. And, it was my way of being of service was to continue to crank out daily, like every single day I would post strategies, empowering things. I wanted that place to be a place people could come for support, to feel empowered, to feel happy. Like, I don't want people to come to my page and feel kind of like, oh, this is like negative Nancy. It's a very uplifting space. And that was what I wanted it to be. Now, of course, I run workshops. I have my mentorship program, which has now gone through 12 rounds. So we're on cohort 12 right now. Right now it's always a small group because I really desire like an intimate space for clinicians to come. I am a big believer that mentorships like this need to be both navigating like your internal environment and your external environment. So we do a lot of inner work around like confidence and, taking action, what's holding us back from doing so. And like the messaging that we tell ourselves that, especially, as women in healthcare, like a lot of us, tell ourselves these stories that just aren't true. So we unpack some of that. And then we look at how do you empower yourself through setting boundaries and self-advocating? What does leadership look like? What do you actually want your life and job to look like? How do you make that happen? Like all of this stuff is within our control for the most part. It's just, we don't know what step one is and we don't know how to get there. And what I do is I'm that intermediary, not only empowering you through tools to work on like your mindset, but also to look at the hard skills. Like I'm a problem solver. I am like definitely a fixer. And I like when it comes to burnout prevention strategy and like work-life balance, we really break down like, where's your time going? What's your time management look like? What are your routines? What are your habits? Like, what does your life look like? What do you want it to look like? What kind of leadership do you have? Who can you talk to? What kind of network do you have? And we do it in community with other women in healthcare who are going through the exact same things you're going through. And that's part of the beauty, exactly what you're saying. Like when you are in a group of people who get it and you're like, oh my God, I'm behind on my charts too. Or, hey, oh my God, like, yeah, I don't know what a hobby is either. Like it makes it so much easier to work through because you feel so much less alone. So, women who go through the program, and no, I do not work with just women. I work with men and women, but in the mentorship program, it is women because I feel like it creates a very safe space to be vulnerable and open, which I think helps us push ourselves out of our comfort zone, like you said, and do the hard thing, which of course is growth mindset, brings us to the place that we feel like our highest and most empowered, best clinician ever self. But yeah, it's really fun. The mentorship itself is like live group coaching calls, like I said, intimate, small. We talk, I coach, it's very interactive. And then there's self-paced video content through a teaching platform. There's a workbook that is like my third child, which I'm very proud of. And then of course, there's tons of other ways to work with me, whether it be one-on-one. We have workshops. I'm running a charting boot camp right now, which will happen again soon. So if you're behind on your charts, definitely join the wait list for that. We definitely don't make personal development and burnout management stuffy. We make it fun. It gets to be good. And it's actually a lot easier than you think to feel fulfilled working as an NP, not feeling drained every day, coming home. Like I haven't charted from home in 5 years because like when you have your time management on point and you prioritize the things that matter to you, it becomes so much easier to make that a reality.
So many great things that you just spoke to, in like where to even begin to sink our teeth in. So I think that the first thing is that these shared experiences and for nurse practitioners and healthcare workers in general to understand, like you are not in it alone. There are several other folks that are feeling the same way that you feel, and that you have created a space and a community for people who are going through these shared experiences to be able to come together and talk about that. I think that's important. It's like, you're not alone in this situation, number one. Number two is that there are resources and ways to change. Like, yeah. I think one of the things that we've heard, that we get feedback on is like, I'm just done. I think I'm going to exit healthcare altogether at this point. Like it's just so much in terms of Right, like all of the things that come along with it, and the burdens, if you will. But like I think it's also super important for providers to realize, like, you are the real world heroes of what goes on in the world, and there's responsibility and a lot that comes along with
Yeah.
that. And so places to be able to like decompress and find the opportunities for yourself to recharge and feel like you can continue to be that superhero every day is like, I think, obviously the goal of what you're doing, but what you want providers to feel. So the fact you've created a space for that is amazing. And you talked about social media and what you're doing there. I think, folks should definitely follow you on social media, and you can see the tips that you're putting out each day. And I want to talk a little bit about social media. So like, you've created a space and a community and an environment that's very uplifting, which is fantastic. But have you seen any of the downsides or the negative sides of social media that sometimes folks hear about? And like, what's your just overall experience in uh, having this presence on social media and the feedback that you get?
So I'm very fortunate. I have not had any kind of trolls on my page or negative Nancy's in my comments or anything like that. And I really haven't run into any like negative stuff. I'm very fortunate. I know that it's out there. Everyone that I've kind of networked with or spoken with, or I get a lot of DMs obviously from nurse practitioners and nurses and healthcare people in general. And everybody, like, it's such an incredible community. Like, it really truly is. And I think it just speaks to what you were just saying, like, that there's so much out there for support, and there's so many really good people out there doing a lot of really good things. Yes, my page is out there. Yes, I have a ton of content. Yes, I have my mentorship, but there's also like a ton of other creators out there. I mean, when I started my page right before the pandemic, there was really like there were a couple people kind of talking about like healthcare stuff. Now there's tons of people talking about healthcare well-being, healthcare provider well-being, nurse practitioner burnout, like all these things. And there's more content out there than you could ever consume, right? So you obviously want to be cautious with what you are actually consuming and live your life. But I haven't really had any negative things. I get messages from people all the time, like, thank you so much. Like, this really helped me. I loved this resource. Or like mentees of mine that I worked with 3 years ago that, send me messages like, oh my God, hey, like, this is my update. And I love it. I absolutely love it. If you had asked me if I would have an Instagram 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have thought you were completely insane. But I do think that, there are some really beautiful things about social media and bringing people together and, talking to NPs from Finland or from Australia or from
Right.
California. You get to just find other humans that have, human experiences and, see how we can unpack that. But it speaks to the whole idea, what you just said, is like, we're not alone. That feeling of like, I just can't do it anymore. Like what you were just saying. I mean, I remember vividly in my first job feeling that way. And truly, I almost left. Like, I was like, I think this is a me problem. Like, I'm not cut out for this. Like, this is just terrible. Like, how can I do this for the rest of my life? And it wasn't a me problem. And listeners, it's not a you problem. And B, we have so much more control than we think. And that's what, I do with my mentees, is really like unpack, like, what do you actually have control over? Like, what actions can you take? Like, boundaries will set you free. I'm telling you. It's just that they feel really socially threatening and kind of scary when you first start. But the more you do things, the more you self-advocate, the more you really do prioritize your identity in your life outside of your job, and recognize that that's not going to like make you less of an NP. It's great. Like, it's just the burnout talking, and it's really hard to make decisions when you're in that space. So I encourage you, if you're in that space, whether you reach out to me or somebody else, like, unpack where that's coming from and see if it's really like you hate your job, or is it just that you're in a bad space and things need to shift.
That's powerful. And I think the ability to be able to look at that yourself is one of the hardest things to do.
Right.
I've throughout my career journey and in personal life as well, one of the mottos that I try and employ each and every day is like, control the things that you can control and react appropriately to the things that you can't. But also know that there's going to be curveballs thrown and things that come out of right field all the time. And it's just like, how can you be best prepared to deal with those things? Like, if you think about, like, I'm a sports guy, so I'll make an analogy here to baseball. Like, a hitter's coming into the batter's box and not knowing what pitch the pitcher's going to throw, but they're prepared to hit all the different kinds of pitches that a pitcher might throw. Are they going to strike out sometimes? Sure. Are you going to foul a ball off and have it like not go in the direction you want to? Sure. But there will be those times where you get the hit, you get on base, you hit the home run, and it's like, baseball is if you're 30% successful, that's considered spectacular. You're a Hall of Famer. So
Right.
like,
Yeah, but it's like those guys, right? Even if they miss the pitch, right? It doesn't make them a bad player.
exactly.
It's just we all have those times where like things don't go as planned, or like life happens while you're making plans, right? Like things derail us. But when we have tools in our toolbox to like set us back on the right trajectory and have the mindset where we're not like, I'm a loser, I'm terrible, like what's wrong with me, I'm such a fraud, like that imposter syndrome, perfection, all these things like that come up, then we can be like, okay, cool, we'll let it roll. Like that was just I just whatever. Failures, feedback, rejections, redirection, we move on. But like it's when our mindset isn't on point. That's why like I really truly believe like we have to manage both in order to truly be ready to tackle those tough curveballs, which are going to happen.
Yeah. It's a balance. It might be easier said than done, but that's when you start to employ these resources and things that are available to you. And so I think the question, the next thing is like, what's your website? What's your social media handles? If people are interested in looking at your resources, where can they find you and engage with that?
Yeah, so we'll put everything in the show notes too, but so Instagram is @Catalyst for Self-Care. That's where kind of I am most frequently found. I have 2 children and I have a job, so I don't do 12 different social media things because I practice what I preach with work-life balance. But yeah, so Instagram is where you can find most of the content. My website is selfcarecatalyst.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a TikTok, but I can't say I really post on there. So, but yeah, so you can definitely email me. There's a lot of free resources on my website that you can download. I would say the post-shift reflection is the most popular, which is an epic resource. Definitely encourage you to check that out. There's a charting boot camp that I run that I'm actually running right now for NPs that are kind of got that backlog, that are struggling with time management and locking those charts by the end of the day so you can leave work on time. If that's something you struggle with, there's a wait list for that you can join for the next round. And of course, mentorship. So mentorship, we run a couple times a year. It's me and I have an accountability and support coach that works with me. And that will be in the fall is the next round. We're in cohort 13 will be in the fall, and there's a wait list on my website as well for that if you're interested.
Awesome. So many great resources Diana has. If you're interested in getting involved at all, that's all there, as she mentioned as well. We'll post those links to the different places she just mentioned in the show notes as well. I want to shift gears a little bit because you're joining us at our Boston conference that's coming up in August. At the end of August, the 25th through the 28th at the Westin Copley Place. And I know you mentioned you've been to NPACE conferences previously. So 2 questions for you. What has been your favorite experience at an NPACE conference that you've been to? And what are you most looking forward to at the upcoming Boston conference?
Well, so I think your content's incredible. Like the teaching really is great. Like it's not a snooze fest, which some conferences can be, let's be honest. I absolutely love, you guys do like the pharmacology and, the credits for acute care, primary care, what have you. Your conferences are definitely my favorite way to get my pharm credits. Because it's just, again, it's so easily digestible. You get a bunch of credits. It's just very easy and very like low friction for me. So I really love that. And I will say the community aspect is great. I think you guys do a great job about making your conferences kind of like an experience versus just like, oh, we're going to get our CEs. It's, there's a lot of opportunities to network with people and connect with other nurse practitioners, and really like, you make it very human. It's very nice to see you guys encouraging that connection and community and empowering people to connect with each other. Because, sometimes when you go to conferences, it can be hard to network. It can be kind of like, oh, I'm like uncomfortable, like putting myself out there. Like, I don't know anyone here, blah, blah, blah. You make it very easy to get involved and to like have fun events and fun little things on the side, in addition to the teaching, which I think is really beautiful. I'm actually very excited, I have to say, to meet some people at your conference that I have not met in real life, that I've talked to on Instagram for a very long time, that are also kind of in the creator world. I saw Sean was speaking. I'm very excited to meet Sean. I think he's awesome. Of course, Michelle, all these other people that are going to be there. So I'm very excited for that, for my own personal reasons, just because it's like, oh, I can hug her in real life. I've talked to her for probably 3 years on Instagram. So those would be my real like major things, is really just like the accessibility of the information, the networking, and the community aspect, and that it's just really truly an experience, not just like a snooze fest where you're just given a bunch of information and you have lunch and then you're given more information. And I also will say, I love that you guys have both the in-person options and the virtual stuff, because like for me as a mom and a working mom, sometimes like going to conferences, like hopping on a plane, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense depending on the chapter of my life that I'm in. So having like those virtual, shorter CEs is just like chef's kiss to make sure you're getting those credits.
Amazing. You said I wish everybody that came in contact with NPACE went out and was able to say what you just said. But really what you just said is what our goal is at NPACE, is the NPACE experience. And when people ask me all the time, like both businesses that we work with and companies that we work with, but also nurse practitioners, like, why should I come to your conference versus another conference? And there are fantastic other conferences out there. And I think that exploring all different kinds of continuing education opportunities are fantastic. But what I will say is what you just said is what our goal is that you're going to come and get your credits. You're going to learn from fantastic speakers that we've been working with for many, many years, and that are experts in their therapeutic areas into what they're speaking to. In Boston in particular, we have some fantastic partners that are joining us. Dexcom is going to be there for a hands-on continuous glucose monitoring program where you can actually get training from their CGM personnel. So really looking forward to that. We have a dinner program that's happening that we're going to be putting some information out to attendees soon. So that networking component and getting to meet folks, and NPACE conferences attract folks from all over the country. So there was a woman at our Hilton Head event that was from Alaska, and she's now imploring us to come to Alaska for an NPACE conference. And so, we'll one day, hopefully. And so, but the goal is for somebody to come and obviously get their credits, but to walk away from it feeling relaxed, rejuvenated, and refreshed. Like you met some new people, you potentially made some new friends, what you just said in terms of, you've been speaking with a few folks on social media over the past couple of years, and we're really excited to have Michelle and Sean and a few other folks. We've been doing some social media work with us there. And that's really the goal, is that when you walk away on that last day of the conference, that you're like, this was worth it. And
fun.
It was fun. It was fun. I was able to have that balance. And like, we know that sitting in a conference room for 4 days can be a lot for folks. And you got to take a call, or you got to check in with the family, or I don't have till 5 p.m. in me today. So everything is recorded at our conferences as well. So somebody can come back, as you mentioned, and those virtual opportunities, if you're unable to get there, great. But really the in-person element to the events is we can't replicate that. You kind of have to be there. That's the best way to put it. And I always tell people, like, come to one, see what it's all about. If you like it, fantastic. You found a place to be able to come back to. And if you didn't, like you gave it a shot, and we really appreciate that as well. So we can't wait to see you in Boston. And it's the same thing. Like we've been back and forth for I don't know, almost a year probably at this point. So we'll finally get to meet in person here as well.
It's really exciting. And I will say to whoever's listening that plans to go, like take advantage of those opportunities to network and like connect with people. I know sometimes it seems scary to like go to that dinner or whatever by yourself, but like just do it. Just put yourself out of your comfort zone, because honestly, like it's way more fun than sitting in your hotel room alone or walking around the city by yourself. And you don't know who you're gonna meet. You might meet like your new bestie or like someone that you can meet year after year when you go to the conference. So I encourage you, just do it. Put yourself out to say like, okay, tonight I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna like put myself out of my comfort zone. It'll help build your confidence.
Love it. And we'll do everything we can during our break times and throughout the conference to help get that out of folks as well. So you'll see me up on the stage. You know, we'll do some icebreakers and those sorts of things. So almost like a camp counselor, if you will.
Nice.
So really looking forward to that. Before we part, Diana, any last things that you want to touch on? Any parting words for our audience today?
I will just say again, like you're not alone. If you feel like you're overwhelmed and you don't know where to start, like just message me, message somebody, ask for help. It does not need to be that way. Like you here to you a month from now could be so different with just a couple tweaks and a couple changes. So it doesn't have to be hard. It can be a lot easier. There's plenty of support for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Diana. We really appreciate you being with us today. This was a fantastic episode. I know that our folks are going to get a lot out of this, and hopefully your audience as well. So once we'll be in touch soon to let everybody know when this episode is going to be coming out. So for our audience, we can't thank you enough for tuning in today. As you probably know by now, the NPACE, or the Friends of NPACE podcast, lives on npace.org, our learning center, and all the streaming platforms that you listen, Spotify, Apple, so on and so forth. So check us out wherever you get your podcasts. We have some great upcoming events in Boston, Cape Cod, and Dana Point the rest of this year. If you want to join us in person, and at learn.npace.org are all those virtual opportunities Diana mentioned a little bit earlier. If you're ever just in need of that quick CE or unable to make experience out of getting there. So all different kinds of ways you can interact with NPACE. So with that being said, this concludes this episode of the Friends of NPACE podcast. Stay tuned to our social media channels for all updates regarding NPACE, and we will see you back for the next episode. Diana, thanks so much. We appreciate it.